In this video, we've compiled the craziest conspiracy theories in Joe Rogan Experience history. Without further ado, let's get started. In episode 1617, Joe interviewed Mike Baker, a former CIA agent and security expert. Baker revealed the information he knew about China's plan to become a global superpower.
Very excited to talk to you because I had a guy on, Jamie Metzl yesterday, a scientist who scared the shit out of me, talking about China. He's talking about China. We were talking about China amassing naval power. China's taking over tech companies and how huge they're getting and how much influence they have over their people as opposed to the way we do it.
Well, he's not wrong.
No.
He's not, I can't spot the lie in what you just said, but look, there's so much we can talk about, but if you think about it, just in the past handful of months, there was this SolarWinds hack, right, by the Russians. So the Russians go in, they hack into a company called SolarWinds that is an IT management software company that happens to be fairly deep into government organizations, agencies, Treasury, and a variety of others throughout the U.S. government. And they're also into parts of the intel community, Defense Department, and a lot of commercial sectors. So anyway, the Russians figure this out. Now, around about December or January, Microsoft, identified this as a problem. And I think it was the head of Microsoft said, this looks like the most sophisticated attack we've ever seen. So this is December, January timeframe. And they're still trying to figure out the depth of this hack by Russians. At the same time, and going back months and months and months and months before, the Chinese had been engaged in a more sophisticated attack that, while everyone is focused on what's going on and so fully aware that we got problems, right, from nation states out there who don't like us, everybody's talking about SolarWinds, and now it's, they've just now released information about the Chinese attack against Microsoft Exchange servers, running the Exchange email systems. And this thing is enormous. And so the Chinese, we've been so focused for 4 years on the Russians, and they're out there to cause us all sorts of problems. So we should be focused on them. But it's China that's the biggest problem. And so this guy is absolutely right. Jamie's right.
It was terrifying.
Yeah.
Listen to what he was talking about, the way he was explaining how they have this plan. I think he said 2049 to be the global superpower of the world and essentially take the place of what America used to be.
Yeah,
they do it their way.
And they do it their way, which means we're going to bypass all the costs and the heavy lift of research and development over the years, and we're just going to steal everything. Yeah. And they've been doing it for decades. So people think, oh, China, it's a problem. We've talked about this before. Yeah. This idea that perhaps this is just something relatively new, or it's popped up during the previous administration of Trump. And honest God's truth is, it's been going on for decades. And they decided that that's how they're going to get to the top of the food chain, is by stealing shit, because it's a lot easier to hoover up everything and then reverse engineer it. And the technology has made it even easier, right? It used to be old school. They'd go out and recruit somebody. They'd find some Chinese American working for a company here in the States. They'd appeal to sort of, you got to help the motherland, and they would. And that was the old school way of doing it. But, cyber theft it's incredible what they're able to do. And this latest attack, while they're still trying to sort out the mess, right?
So when they do this, so if they get into this email server, are they targeting anything specific? Is there specific companies? Are they just like throwing a net out there and seeing what they catch?
Yes, is the answer to both of those. It looks like what happened here was that their initial point of attack, or the initial focus, was intelligence, right? So then it branched out, and it branched out very, very quickly, right, to hit everything, small companies, medium-sized companies. And that's kind of the MO for the Chinese. The Chinese regime, right, their intel operations, they've got this long vision. And they've also got the resources, and they've got the desire to hoover up everything and then sort it out later. We take, as a country, we take a very sort of targeted approach, right? We say, okay, this is a piece of information that's a priority tasking for the U.S., for our national security. We're going to go out, we're going to figure out who has access to it. We're going to develop a very sort of surgical strike to figure out how do we get to somebody who's got this piece of information. That's typically how we or some of our allies would operate. The Russians, the Chinese have always had a different approach. I mean, the Russians is less elegant. The Russians are just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks, right? But the Chinese, they've got this long view, and they've also got this ability. And so in this particular attack that they're still trying to assess, that was perpetrated by, Chinese state-sponsored hackers based in China. They're just going to take everything, and then they'll sift through it. They'll figure out what they got. A lot of it's going to be just, chafe, not of interest, but they're going to find a lot of gold in there too. And they're willing to do that because they've got the patience to do it. They'll develop a target. They'll develop a potential recruit for years and years and years. Or they'll infiltrate a society or an organization, right? They'll put a student out here who's actually working for the PLA, for their intel operations, and they'll put him out as an undergrad. And then they'll go to school, and they'll get good grades, and they'll go to grad school, and then they'll get a job, and they'll get another job, and then 30 years down the line, it may pay off. But they're willing to make that investment. So
we should be scared.
Well, we shouldn't be scared, but we should, yeah. I don't think we should be scared, but I think what we should be is pragmatic and understand why. For instance, I mean, there was a lot of, hue and cry over the past 4 years. I can't believe I just said hue and cry.
I don't even know what that means.
I don't know. It's just like, it's old-timey.
Is it?
Yeah, oh, by golly.
What is
Look
hue
at me.
and cry?
It's like the cat's pajamas. So 4 years of Trump and sort of his antagonistic relationship with China, and people were all wringing their hands in Washington, D.C., the think tankers and the traditional pundits and the diplomats of the U.S., the long-term people. They're, oh, my God, we've got this adversarial relationship with China. Well, you know what? We better, right? So that's not a bad thing. So I'm hoping the current administration maintains to some degree, and we'll see what happens.
In episode 1897, Joe talked to famous pseudoscientific theorist Randall Carson and Graham Hancock, a writer known for his pseudoscientific theories about ancient civilizations. They went deep into ancient technology that has been lost over time and how these may have been used to build structures like the Great Pyramids.
Now, the Great Pyramid of Giza is probably the most stunning of all these ancient structures. And the stones are immense, and some of them were cut from a quarry that's hundreds of miles away. How do you think they did that?
Well, some of them, the granite in the Great Pyramid comes from more than 500 miles to the south. If you look at the famous King's Chamber, its walls and its roof are, the ceiling of the King's Chamber are all made with gigantic granite blocks. Now, Egyptologists will tell you that, they could move heavy blocks because they put them on wet sand and they push them along on wet sand. Well, maybe if you're just at ground level, that will do. But when you're 350 feet above the ground, as you are in the King's Chamber, that won't do at all. I think we're looking, again, at a lost technology. And it was this ancient apocalypse 12,800 years ago that wiped that from the human memory banks almost completely, not entirely completely because there were survivors. Sea level rise, it creates a powerful high energy zone. Anything that was existing on those flooded coastlines has just been pounded to hell.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a lot more energetic than now. I mean, imagine your sea level rising at 3 or 4 times at least faster than we've seen rise in the last century. And within there, juxtaposed are these episodes of very rapid sea level rise. So you're talking about a very energetic intertidal zone. And anything that's there, short of large megalithic blocks, is going to be utterly obliterated by the time the process is through. And I think that this is one of the things that, the archaeologists and the prehistorians, people are looking at that, have failed to take into account the severity of these events we're talking about. Because the question always is, where are the artifacts? Where's the pottery? Where is the evidence that this civilization existed? And I have 2 responses to that. One, you don't realize the extent of the total remodeling of this planetary surface that took place. What are you going to find? What are you going to look for? It's going to be just rubble that gets reincorporated just into the geological stratum, and it's going to be very difficult to differentiate, for example, from what's called a conglomeratic rock, which is basically we have just a huge jumble of broken rock cemented together. The other thing is when we talk about these ancient technologies, if we're only looking for a mere reflection of ourselves, we could overlook it completely, because I think there's evidence that exists now. I mean, some modern researchers whose work has been buried or suppressed, I think we're getting very close to rediscovering some of the things that our ancient ancestors were up to. There are people who've been working on these things for decades now, basically in secret. And I've had the privilege of talking to some of these people over the last 6 or 7 years. And right now, as we're speaking, there's a group of people who are basically going to open source a whole lot of stuff in the next 3 months, so it can never get suppressed again. There's a laboratory right now in the Maldives that's been building prototypes using these technological principles, which are based on implosion rather than explosion.
I think the key thing is we're looking at technologies that are not the same as ours.
Yes.
And that's
Yes,
partly
that's the
why
point.
archaeologists can't see them, because they're looking for us in the past, and they're not open to the possibility that there are whole other kinds of technology that could be used.
Right.
I always go back to the ancient Egyptian traditions that speak of priests chanting as these huge blocks were lifted into the air. Were they using some kind of sound effect, some kind of use of sound that was able to manipulate matter? We know that sound can manipulate matter, as a matter of fact, but they're lifting these blocks. Again and again, it appears in ancient Egyptian traditions. The notion that we could lift huge blocks with sound seems absurd to archaeologists, and yet it's there in the traditions of the Egyptologists. And what Randall's talking about now is people who are working on a whole alternative path of technology, and maybe that's a rediscovery of the kind of technologies that were used by a lost civilization.
If you think about the amount of progress that we've achieved as modern humans just in the last few hundred years,
Yeah.
if you go back 400 years to now, it's a stunning amount of achievement.
Absolutely stunning.
And if you have a completely different path of technology,
Yeah.
one that's not utilizing internal combustion engines and cranes and
Yeah.
and the like that we experience
Leverage,
today.
mechanical
Yeah.
advantage, everything that our tech is based around.
Something that's insanely advanced, tens of thousands of years of a different path.
Yeah.
And that may be what we're looking at.
And that may begin to explain these otherwise inexplicable monuments that have survived.
This is the work of Nikola Tesla. This is some of the stuff that's now being developed using his ideas plus some of the others. Here's an example of what they're doing. This is a generator that has no moving parts. It's all based on geometry. Everything vibrates at a frequency, and if you know that frequency, you can control things. And I think that's the basic idea of what we're looking at here. And it's all based upon the ancient numbers. And they're developing technologies right now, and they have been.
I mean, would it be fair to say that there's an element of a rediscovery of a
Yes.
lost technology from the past?
I think it would be fair to say that, yes.
And so through this technology, they're able to move stones or cut stones or all the above?
All the above. This inventor who's working with this small group contacted me, and this is what he told me. He said, you built the foundation. He said, you laid the foundation with your work on ancient geometry, and I built a house on top of it. That's what he said.
Nice.
So for 7 years, he's been supplying me with all the information. I have copies of all the patents. I have videos of the testing of the prototypes. And Mazda, the car manufacturer in Japan, is getting ready to do a $25 million testing of some of these prototypes that they believe they can retrofit internal combustion engines with. And there's over 100, they've developed over 100 patents on some of this stuff.
At least what's promising is that there is some, at least research or understanding.
And it's actually quite mature at this point. And in order to avoid the kinds of fate that befell Tesla and Reich, Robert Oppenheimer, Victor Schauberger, and so many others that were working in these fields, It's been conducted in secret.
In episode 1829, Joe spoke to cognitive neuroscientist and science journalist Bobby Azarian, who shared his theories about how the universe is developing a consciousness.
You think that this is a process that is leading towards what? Do you extrapolate? Do you really think that, like, do you wonder, like, what humans are actually doing, what consciousness is actually doing, why the universe has this as a tendency or as a law?
Yeah, no, it's I think it's the most mysterious question there is. So is there an ultimate goal?
Right.
What I do think is that this increase in complexity is inevitable, but like I said, it's not this straight march of progress. There's like constantly these challenges. There's massive existential challenges, and that is the only thing that pushes us to create solutions. So there's this principle in the book that I call Popper's principle, named after a philosopher of science, Karl Popper. And the idea is that, so that our challenges are what force us to find solutions. So if progress is going to always continue, that means the challenges won't stop. So even if we do attain some like globally unified state, I would like to see like some sort of agreement among nations that says, okay, we're all going to demilitarize and we're going to put this money into like medicine or technology, whatever else, all of the other things that, we could be funding that could help, human society. We could have something like that, but there could still be like pandemics. There could still be someone crazy that takes over and starts to, try to reverse that. So the point is, you can never reach a utopia. And even if we did, it wouldn't be a utopia for a long time, because the world is always changing. It's this, reality is this noisy, thermally fluctuating thing, and there is chaos. Chaos is needed for complexity too. Actually, when a system transitions to a state of higher order, you need some chaos in the system. So that's because, like, if a system is too rigid and too, so you could think of like things seemed, we had democratic presidents, like you could think about just like how things were under Obama for a while. There wasn't the craziness that we're seeing today. So you might think like, oh, well, whatever that system was, it was a good thing, or it was better than what we have now. But no system, no model, no way of doing things will work forever, because the external world is always changing. So we're always going to be going through these cycles and phases where we have temporary stability, but then the system needs to change. And I think right now, when we're seeing all this chaos, it is indicative of what complexity scientists call a phase transition. And so basically, the chaos is basically the system screaming for change. So you see all of this chaos, and that provides, it creates flexibility within a rigid system that allows the system to transition into something new and higher. Better.
So you think that this is a function of the universe, that the universe has a tendency towards complexity, and that we are one of the driving forces of this?
Yes.
So we're a biological driving force of a greater law of the universe.
Yeah.
But what do you think the universe wants? Like, what's the ultimate goal out of this?
So, when you talk about what the universe wants, we're already getting into like a little language trap, because are we saying that the universe is conscious, that it has a conscious intent? I don't think so.
Well, let me ask it in a different way.
Okay.
Where do you think this is going?
Well, no, so it's good to kind of break that down and be like, does the universe have a conscious intent? So I don't think it does, but I think it has sort of design. And when I say design, it's something that's not mystical. I'm saying that the laws of physics are such that complexity increases, And the universe does have something like a goal. So it may not have a conscious intent, but life emerges inevitably, and that the laws of physics play something analogous to DNA in an organism. So the laws and constants of physics are sort of cosmic DNA that ensures that this evolutionary program plays out. So maybe the universe is moving towards something like a cosmic attractor. And an attractor is a term that physicists use to describe a state of order. So, for example, when you take the stopper out of your bathtub, you will get the formation of a whirlpool, so you get this spontaneous order.
Gravity's attracting the water down the pipe, and
Yep. So you have these attractors, which are basically kind of this goal state of a system. In living systems, attractors are basically states of stability that the living system is trying to maintain against this second law of thermodynamics. And so it seems like cosmic evolution is a process of generating increasingly complex attractors. So when I say that, there are these evolutionary transitions, which are versions of phase transitions that I just explained. So if you look at the story of the universe, it's a story of nature's simplest parts coming together to form larger functional wholes. So atoms come together to make molecules, which come together to make cells, which come together to make multicellular organisms, which come together to form societies. And now we have something like the emergence of a global brain, which is the network of humans connected by the internet, as well as AIs. And so when humans leave the planet, like people out there like Elon Musk with SpaceX are trying to get humans off the planet, I'm saying that that's part of this natural evolutionary process. It wasn't just like a decision someone made or, something that we decided to do because we're clever or something. It's actually baked into this process. And that's because if life is going to continue to persist, it has to get off the planet before its star dies. So it creates like a game clock that forces life to spread. What is the end state? Maybe something like this cosmic attractor, where some very legitimate scientists have speculated, people like Paul Davies, Ray Kurzweil, as a technology guy, may seem, futurist, may seem a little bit more out there, but there's this idea that, the universe is evolving and waking up, and that there could be this integrated state where something like a cosmic mind emerges from this process.
In episode 1928, Joe had a discussion with independent researchers and YouTubers Jimmy Corsetti and Ben Van Kerkwick. During the episode, Corsetti revealed new information about the lost city of Atlantis' existence.
Jimmy, I watched your whole series on Atlanta all day today. I've been watching for hours. I've been watching impact videos about the Atlanta structure, and so let's just get into it.
Let's do it. So the Richat structure, I was on your show a little over a year ago and shared some details about it. To people who aren't aware, there's a location in the Western Sahara Desert of Mauritania called the Richat structure. It's also commonly referred to as the Eye of the Sahara. It is a site that most people have never seen or heard of before, which is truly peculiar because it's so spectacular. It's a site that astronauts typically use to reference from space. It is a geological feature that is said to be volcanic in nature. And what's so spectacular about this is that it just so happens to match more than a dozen striking similarities to what Plato had described as the lost ancient capital city of Atlantis.
I almost feel like we're not going to do your video justice by just talking about it, because the video is so good and you go into so many details. By the end of it, my jaw was dropped. I was like, holy shit. Like, from what you had the last time you were on the podcast to what you put out now, it's even more compelling. Way more compelling. There's so much that points to that possibly being Atlantis.
It's spectacular. So just to run down real quick, Plato had described Atlantis as being the capital. Let me just mention that because it was an empire said to be made up of 10 kingdoms. And what I'm focusing on is the lost capital city, which was said to be made up of concentric circles, 3 of water, 2 of land, which matches the Richat structure. It also was said to have an opening to the sea at the south. And if you look at it from satellite imagery, you can clearly see that water had ran through it. And furthermore, it was said to have mountains to the north, and you just so happen to have mountains called the Atlas mountain chain, which Atlas was said to be the very first king of Atlantis. And what's interesting is that the very first known king of Mauritania, which is where the Richat structure is located, is also, their very first known king was also named Atlas. And though I'm not saying that that's the same individual, but what we do today is we pass down names, right? Like people like, oh, my dad's name's John, and so is my son. And so it's another striking similarity, but it goes further than that. Like there's geological similarities, such as the fact that Atlantis was said to be made up of red, black, and white color stone, which is another similarity you see at the Richat structure. It was said to have an abundance of gold and that the outer walls were lined with it. And it turns out that Mauritania is loaded with gold, and not only that, the richest person ever known to exist in all of mankind is Mansa Musa of the Mali Empire, which consisted partly of modern-day Mauritania. And he was so rich from gold that he would be richer than Elon Musk and like Bezos combined almost. Like many unfathomable amount of billions of dollars. So that's another similarity.
What year was this?
Oh, this is 1300s or 1400s?
There he is.
Yeah, there we are. 1312, 1337.
What a great name, too. Mansa Musa.
But the similarities don't end there. There was said to be an abundance of elephants, which is one reason why to suggest that Atlantis would have been in Africa is because, well, besides the fact that elephants are known to be throughout Africa, they used to be in Mauritania. They're unfortunately pretty much extinct there today. But another little detail that most people aren't aware of, because they think of Atlantis like, oh, it must be at the bottom of the ocean. Well, that's not exactly how Plato worded it. He did describe that the aftermath of Atlantis followed a catastrophic event involving water, is that what was left of Atlantis was reeds of grass and a shoal of mud that prevented ships from navigating to and from. And what people don't realize is that Sahara Africa, up until about 4,500 to 5,000 years ago, was totally green. It was tropical. It had the largest network, or one of the largest networks of rivers ever known to exist. It had the largest freshwater lake ever known to exist, which is Mega Lake Chad, which, just to put this into perspective, it is, if you take all the North American Great Lakes combined, that's 94,000 square miles of surface area, whereas Mega Lake Chad was 139,000.
Whoa.
Massive. Additionally, Atlantis, the capital, was said to have a river that went just north of it or next to it, and the Tamanrasset River went right through the Richat structure, or just north of it, went all the way to the Atlas Mountains that I described, which is in modern-day Morocco. And the evidence is that it existed at that same period of time when Atlantis was said to be around 11,600 years ago prior to its destruction, up until about 5,000 years ago. So going back to my point, like a lot of people see the Sahara Desert and they don't realize that this place was unbelievably different than it is today. And one of the things that's so important is that I know some people listening will, they hear Atlantis, they think, oh, it didn't exist.
Right.
Whether it existed or not, the evidence that we're going to chat about today to show you that there is conclusive evidence, I would say, that catastrophic water erosion, that the ocean had blasted through the Sahara tens of millions of years more recently than previously known. According to the science, 56 to 66 million years ago was the time of the Trans-Saharan Seaway, which was the last time the ocean blasted through it. However, there are a few lines of evidence that say otherwise. Besides the fact that anyone that looks at the Sahara Desert through the Google Earth app, you can see fluvial striations, which is signature traits of water erosion. This is confirmed by other experts that look into these things. I like to mention Randall Carlson. Mm-hmm. He's someone that's analyzed the area and has said, yes, this is catastrophic water erosion. And you can see those striations, which are signature traits of water erosion. All those white blemishes are salt, and I should point out real quick that it is a confirmed fact that much of the Sahara has surface level salt. And you see those white blemishes on that mountain, that is not clouds, that is not snow. those are salt deposits.
And surface level salt that would have been from the ocean?
That is what I suggest, because in the middle of that caldera, you have huge patches of salt. And is it reasonable to suggest that that salt existed before the creation of that volcano? Because it seems to me that all that that salt would burn up. And,
Right.
and not only that, there is scientific studies that show that there are gastropods, which are sea life, that existed inside that caldera that used to be 1,000 feet deep and dried up just a few thousand years ago. So the fact that this is an 11,000 foot volcano that has salt on top of it, I would say is corresponding evidence that the ocean had once went through it.
In episode 1821, Joe talked to stand-up comedians Bert Kreischer and Tony Hitchcliffe, and they delved into their theories and ideas about time travel.
It's crazy. Have you seen that new movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once?
No, but I keep hearing amazing things about it.
Yeah, we just saw it this past
Did you go to the movie theater?
weekend. Yeah.
Look at you, like a regular person.
Yeah, I
Movie
like it.
theater.
Yeah.
How was it? Tell me what it's
It's
a multiverse kind of movie,
it's
right?
like that. She ends up figuring out how to switch into her different lives and like take different times, different lives that she's lived throughout all of time.
Wait, what the
And
fuck?
fast forward and rewind and use these things to her advantage and try to accomplish things. It's crazy.
Oh, I love time travel.
Yeah, it's wild.
Everything Everywhere All at Once. You know, that was the theory that Terrence McKenna had to the thing that's going to change the universe, is that one day someone's going to invent a time machine, and that when they invent a time machine, all time ceases to become linear. So you think if you have a time machine, well, I'll just go back to the time where they were making the pyramids and I'll watch them do it. That's not what it works like. What he was saying, you can't travel where there are no roads. So once a road gets built, then you can travel. So once a time machine gets invented, then anyone from the invention of the time machine forward to forever can come back to that moment and can go to any point in time from that moment to the end of time. So all time ceases to be linear. So there's no like tomorrow will be Wednesday and the next day will be Thursday. No. It's everything happens everywhere all at once.
I
So
love
people
this.
can travel back and forth through time. You can never own anything because someone could just travel through time and take it away from you when you weren't looking. Like as time travel gets more and more sophisticated, you can go back and forth in time while you're talking to people. You know, if you don't like what you said, you could rewind and start all over again. If you're in an argument with your wife, you can go to the library and get information and come back and go, actually, you know, Herodotus once said, and then bam, your wife thinks you're the smartest guy in the world. Like this, but it would there would be no normal life anymore. It would the world itself would be completely unrecognizable because time would mean nothing. You'd be able to travel back and forth through time.
All right, so then, where would you go right now? Just if I could do, we can time travel right now. Go back in
the past.
In the past.
Well-
What's one thing you'd like to see again?
See, that would be a different kind of time travel. That's an unrealistic theatrical version of time travel because, like you said, once time is invented, once time travel is invented, that's the time you can start traveling. So you
can't go before that.
Right.
Okay.
So like here we are. It's May of 2022. If time travel is invented in June, we're not going back to April. You can't go back to April.
Okay.
But you can go from June to 1,000,000 years in the future and see what people look like. You'll be able to do that. But they'll be able to come back too, and everything's going to be happening everywhere all at once. There's not going to be any sort of structure to life. There's not going to be anything in terms of money, possessions. As long as you could freely time travel, there will be no time. Everything's going to be moving around, and also instantaneously you'll become immortal. Because whatever we have right now in terms of technology, what we're going to have in 1,000,000 years is going to be godlike. And you're going to be able to travel to that if in fact that actually does even take place. Because the question becomes like, what is the future if time travel does exist? So if time travel exists in June of 2022, is there even a future? Like, does it even take place? Because how can anybody invent things when they can just travel to a point where someone invented it already? But how are they going to invent it already if you can just travel to the future? And do they invent things still? Or do people, if they do invent things, what's to stop people from going back before them and taking the idea and introducing it before that? Thus, there'll be no intellectual property because there'll be no way to say you came up with it first. It won't exist.
Carlos Mencia will be the greatest comedian in the world.
Ah!
Just smashing.
Wow.
Think about that.
Is there someone working on time machines
Yeah.
right now? There's got to be, right?
Well, there's a guy named Ronald Millett. I think he's out of the University of Connecticut, if you Google this. And he's got the craziest Spider-Man character origin story. His father died, and he became obsessed with time travel because he wanted to go back in time and save his father. So he became a professor studying time travel, and he came up with a workable model of a time machine, but it requires immense power. That's him. Ron Millett built a device that illustrates the principles he believes could be used to build a time machine. But he was one of the people that came up with one of the first people to come up with the realization or the revelation that once that time machine was invented,
His dad died in
from
Vietnam.
then, yeah. It is really like a comic book superhero sort of origin story, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's a great origin story.
Yeah. So this guy has become obsessed and has been working on it for decades. And they think they have a working model of, like at least a theoretical model of a time machine, but it just requires like the power of the sun. It requires immense power. And I think there's a guy from, the early 19th century, Kurt Gödel. He wasn't from the early 19th century, early 20th century. And he had a working model of a time machine too, but it involved something as large as like the solar system. Like you needed a machine the size of a solar system or something crazy. Yeah. Kurt Gödel in 1949 found a solution to the field equations of general relativity which described a space-time with some unusual properties. This Gödel universe permitted closed time-like curves, hence a kind of time travel, and it did not admit decomposition into the successive moments of time. Yeah, so he had.
I didn't
so
understand
there's been a
any
few
of that
guys.
sentence.
Nah,
I mean,
I
like
don't think
that's
I did either.
I'm like so stupid that if I start to realize what that means, it gives me a panic attack. Like as you talk about, there's no anything ever anywhere, or when you just mentioned the universe, and I realize there is something really up there. Like
it's not just up there.
It's out there.
Yeah, it's all around you.
That I don't
for
like.
infinity.
Joe has discussed many different topics in the thousands of podcast episodes he's done. Click now to see the craziest alien theories in Joe Rogan history.